Unravel the mystery of Blackbeard's treasure, rumored to be buried across the Caribbean, as we delve into the shadowy world of 18th-century piracy and the tantalizing clues left behind by the infamous pirate himself. What secrets does the sea keep about the true extent of his plunder? Join the hunt for Blackbeard's lost treasure. Subscribe now for a thrilling dive into pirate lore and hidden riches. The story of the infamous 18th-century pirate known as Blackbeard has passed into legend. In the 300 years that have passed since his death, we are still no closer to discovering his treasure. In this documentary, we take a look across the Caribbean and the east coast of America in a quest to find his plunder. Find out if old pirate tales of adventure on the high seas, black flags, treasure maps, and chests of gold have any basis in reality. Subscribe to Fact Feast so you can feast your eyes on more content from the darker side. Legend tells that Blackbeard buried extraordinary amounts of ill-gotten gold and silver on the islands throughout the Caribbean. But is this a tale based more in myth than reality? We seek to separate fact from fiction to identify what treasure he may have had and where it could be hidden today. Stories of swashbuckling pirates reached the height of popularity with Robert Louis Stevenson's book, Treasure Island. In 1883, this novel and many like it, that borrow few facts and mix them with much fantasy could well be the cause of pirate lore today. In fact, this famous book derived its inspiration from one far older, A General History of Pirates, authored by Captain Charles Johnson, published in 1724, and a prime source, if not heavily exaggerated account of pirating in the 18th century, including Blackbeard's biography. Actually, the notion of pirates burying treasure first appeared in the text of Johnson's book. It's not hard to see why an epic account of a treasure map and the dramatic quest for buried treasure chests on a tropical island would capture public imagination. The fact that we know that the pirate, William Kidd, actually did bury treasure on an island, some within a chest, only for it to be recovered by the authorities adds fuel to the legend. However, the only known authenticated treasure chest we have today, once owned by a pirate, is a metal chest left in Newport, Rhode Island, by Thomas Tew. But it's fanciful to believe that a pirate would ever risk his fortune to a treasure map, and in all honesty, you couldn't hide all that much treasure in a chest anyway. Even Captain Kidd didn't do that. The owners of Gardiner's Island permitted him to bury his chest, coins, gems, and boxes of gold and silver, and Kidd handsomely recompensed this amicable arrangement. That's not to say that other pirates didn't seek to hide treasure on islands. They did, and we'll discuss this later. So it seems all the more likely that a pirate, being a skilled sailor, will make an exception for Stede Bonnet, more on him later, would keep its location in his head rather than on navigational charts. Blackbeard's story begins in the golden age of piracy. Whilst we better know him today by the name that describes his appearance, the name he used has historically been confused. Edward Teach was more likely Edward Thatch. He was an Englishman who may initially have been a privateer operating from Jamaica and fighting in the War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714. Following its conclusion, he fell into piracy. Firstly, in New Providence through the company of the pirate, Benjamin Hornigold, captaining a sloop from him and later gaining command of his own ship after meeting Stede Bonnet and taking control of his ship, Revenge. Bonnet was a landowner, an amateur pirate, whose crew were given little choice but to join Blackbeard. Throughout 1717, they added to their fleet and raided ships for their goods along the coast of America, with wine being a favorite plunder. Hornigold retired from piracy, perhaps after a dispute, taking 2 ships with him and leaving Blackbeard with Revenge and another sloop. Later that year, he commandeered the French merchant ship, La Concorde, off the coast of St. Vincent, seizing 20 pounds of gold dust. He re-equipped and upgunned her to become his fast and maneuverable flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge, which he named after the late English monarch. The strength of this ship would open the possibility to yet larger prizes. The captaincy of Revenge was given to Lieutenant Richards of his crew. He continued to loot his way through the Caribbean. In late 1717, Blackbeard stopped a merchant ship captained by Henry Bostock, and being held aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge whilst his ship was ransacked, Bostock had sight of her interior. Returned unharmed, he later described his ordeal to the governor of St. Christopher Island. He talked of valuable gold dust, silver plate platter is Spanish for sliver, and a very fine cup. But this tale may have been no more than sailors provoking the unfortunate captain. We don't know Blackbeard's exact movements between late 1717 and early 1718. Although he is known to have harassed shipping sailing to and from the port of Veracruz, Mexico, and traversing the Bay of Honduras, it seems he was making June-seizing ships with commodities such as wood and molasses rather than Spanish gold or silver, and according to Johnson's account, supposedly taken from Blackbeard's now-lost journal, this meagre return and a lack of rum risked his crew's mutiny. In April 1718, he enlarged his flotilla by capturing the 10-gun logwood-cutting sloop, Adventure, at Turneffe Atoll on the Belize Barrier Reef, and gave her captaincy to Israel Hands, unrelated to the villainous pirate of the same name employed by Stevenson in his book. He then headed to the east coast of Florida, desperate to quench his crew's thirst for gold. He must have heard of pirates making a fortune by diving for gold riches lost by a Spanish treasure fleet returning from the New World to Spain in 1715. The amount of riches the ships contained almost defies belief, but included gold coins, gold and silver ingots, gold jewelry, emeralds, and silks. The crew was surely thwarted in this plan by a Spanish fleet, who had already salvaged much of the riches from the wrecks and returned it to Havana, as well as the English pirate, Henry Jennings, who stole a lot of the remainder. There are no reports of Blackbeard returning to port and creating a local sensation with treasure in the same way Jennings did. Although Blackbeard likely recovered little of the gold and silver coins that were lost when a hurricane sank 11 out of 12 Spanish ships, it's still possible to find artifacts and coins washed up along the treasure coast of Florida. It's not hard to see why pirates found Spanish treasures so appealing. It's been estimated that a single Spanish galleon might carry 2 million pesos, or pieces of 8, a denomination popularized today by fictional pirate tales to mean money in general, or treasure. The New World mints produced silver coinage known as cobs of 8, reales value, and gold cobs known as escudos, which were crudely minted by hand and looked much like bullion, because the crown was entitled to 1/5 of all golds and silver minted. Cobs were generally accepted around the world for the fineness of silver to about 27 grams, and, combined with the ease at which they could be clipped and counterfeited, made them a particular favorite of pirates. Blackbeard's flotilla sailed on to Charlestown in South Carolina, and blockaded the port for several days, capturing ships and ransacking them for loot likely to have been commodities. He also demanded medical supplies, sending an ultimatum to the town that he would remove the heads of prisoners unless he received them. We do know that some of the townsfolk held captive for a time by Blackbeard were relieved of their valuables and fine clothing upon being released in exchange for the supplies, which may explain that what he found on board the ships was of little worth. Blackbeard ran Queen Anne's Revenge aground, perhaps on purpose, in June 1718, at Beaufort Inlet, formerly Topsail Inlet, off the coast of North Carolina. Another sloop was grounded trying to kedge her off the sandbar, and was abandoned. Bonnet made away on the Revenge, and Blackbeard on Adventure, having transferred his plunder. In 1996, salvagers discovered the wreck of what is thought to be the Queen Anne's Revenge. Not many coins or valuables have been recovered from her wreck so far that would bear comparison to stories of riches in pirate legends, but there are hints of wealth. One item that stands out is the stem of a wine glass decorated with diamonds and tiny embossed crowns, made to commemorate the 1714 coronation of Queen Anne's successor, King George I. Of broader significance to pirating would be a set of apothecary weights. Typically pharmaceutical, they may have been appropriated to measure gold dust. Several identifiable objects fit the Blackbeard timeframe, including pewter dishes and bottles, and, importantly, cannons. What is really interesting is the sheer amount of cannons of all sizes and makes. Over 30 found so far, and masses of lead shot, all of which supports our knowledge from historical text, namely, that Blackbeard is known to have armed the frigate with 40 cannons, whilst merchant ships equipped considerably less. If there's no treasure to be found on his wreck, there is a fortune to be found somewhere here, one that Blackbeard would no doubt have prized had he lived to see it. The Spanish treasure ship, El Salvador, ran aground near Beaufort Inlet in 1750, carrying at least 4 chests of gold coins and 16 chests of silver coins, to which the contract to salvage rests, with the same company that has rights to Blackbeard's flagship. The North Carolina Office of State Archaeology are comfortable that the wreck is Blackbeard's flagship, and in any event, it was a pirate ship in all probability. And what is fascinating in our quest for this treasure are the traces of gold particles recovered, which just might be a hint of the frigate's former incarnation, La Concorde. In fact, a fleur-de-lis shape is present on one of the aforementioned apothecary weights, as well as a keg spigot. This form is a French royal symbol and supports the view that the wreck is the former merchant ship. What's more revealing about the wreck for treasure hunters, however, is that its grounding on the sandbanks was non-violent. Whilst some believe this is to be the fault of a treacherous navigation, which remains notoriously difficult to this day, it's also been speculated that Blackbeard must have known his ship was too large to traverse the shallow waters of Beaufort Inlet. Therefore, he made a deliberate decision to do so, his aim being to downsize his crew, some of whom confirmed as much, and offload plunder onto smaller boats, thus increasing his share of the spoils. Since he left many of his men stranded on a sandbank when leaving, perhaps he was sharing too little loot between too many heads. If this theory is true and he had time to do this methodically, it's unlikely that today's marine archaeologists will find his treasure here. Though this never deterred treasure hunters searching for it on the adjacent island. On the other hand, the intentional loss of his flagship would seem extreme, so this may simply have been a reaction to an accident, whereby the loss of ships reduces the demand for crew. Blackbeard's pirating was cut short just 6 months after he abandoned his ship. He surrendered to Governor Eden of North Carolina in June 1718, and received the king's pardon upon promising to change his ways. He set up in Bath, and likely proved popular with many residents, who may well have benefited from trading goods with him for favorable prices. There is no record of violence on his part up until his final battle. Despite a brutal reputation, encouraged by the authorities, residents probably thought he was more fair than fierce, and are the kind of hero against the ruling classes. It's even speculated that he may have taken a wife. However, Blackbeard and his men may have squandered too much money on wine and merrymaking. He was given permission by Eden to return to the seas as a privateer in command of his remaining sloop, Adventure. He had only been ashore a matter of a few months, but had presumably become troublesome, and this solution had advantage for both men. By August 1718, however, he had returned to Piracy, operating in Delaware Bay and making himself an enemy of the governor of Pennsylvania in his voyages. He took 2 French ships leaving the Caribbean, and returned with one of them loaded with barrels of sugar and bags of cocoa to Ocracoke. Conveniently, an Admiralty court decided to believe Blackbeard's story that the ship was found derelict at sea, allowing him to keep some of the cargo, after Eden and the collector of customs had taken their share. Ocracoke Island became a pirate refuge for a short time as Blackbeard and notorious figures such as Israel Hands, Robert Deal, and Calico Jack used the anchorage as vantage point to track shipping, and a waypoint for moving goods into Bath. But for Blackbeard, this haven was the calm before the storm. The news that Blackbeard was back in business troubled the governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood. He had little faith in the Carolinian authorities to control the pirate, and saw him as a threat to Virginian commerce. Having no jurisdiction in the neighboring colony, he initially ran into legal difficulties when he held the former quartermaster of the Queen Anne's Revenge, William Howard. Learning of Blackbeard's whereabouts, he hatched a plan to capture him that would allow his forces to operate across the border. He gained the support of 2 prominent Carolinians, Edward Moseley and Colonel Maurice Moore. Furthermore, he wrote to Lords of Trade suggesting that the Crown might benefit financially from the mission. It's unclear whether Spotswood had specific information from William Howard as to the nature of the goods on Blackbeard's sloop, or the whereabouts of the cargo that had been unloaded from Queen Anne's Revenge. Yet, he personally financed the operation, possibly believing that Teach had fabulous treasures hidden away. The claim he made to entice the Lords of Trade into support may have been made on the assumption he could at least recover his costs if the ship held commodities, but would benefit financially if it would also be caught in possession of greater valuables. Two commandeered armed sloops were sent against Blackbeard on the 17th of November, 1718, commanded by Lieutenant Robert Maynard. A force was also moved by land to Bath, led by Captain Brand to ascertain the pirates' whereabouts and put down any local hostility. Maynard found the pirates anchored on the inner side of Ocracoke Island on the evening of 21st of November. Johnson, in his book on pirates, recounted a conversation between Blackbeard and a member of his crew held when Maynard was approaching, in which Blackbeard is asked whether his wife knew where he had buried his money, to which Blackbeard is said to have replied, "Nobody but himself and the devil knew where it was, and the longest liver should take it all." We are interested here primarily with the search for and historical background to Blackbeard's treasure, and so won't describe in detail the events of his demise. It does perhaps suffice to say that the ensuing ambush of adventure by the Royal Navy sloops resulted in ship-to-ship conflict and a luckless boarding of a sloop by Blackbeard, who had been tricked into believing less men had been aboard. Fighting with flintlocks and at close quarters with cutlasses, he and his crew succumbed to superior numbers. Blackbeard's body was thrown into Pamlico Sound and his head suspended from the sloop's bowsprit so as to collect a reward. Now in custody of the Adventure, Maynard's search of Blackbeard's ship, as well as his tent ashore, revealed sugar, cocoa, indigo, and cotton, totaling $22.38. The loot was auctioned and proved more than enough for Spotswood to pay for the entire operation. Incidentally, it is recorded that Maynard and his crew, perhaps aggrieved the colonial prize money was not immediately forthcoming, helped themselves to 90 worth of Blackbeard's booty. Although this cargo was evidently valuable in terms of its financial worth, it seems that there were no precious metals aboard unless Maynard pocketed them. That being said, there is no record of what became of the lieutenant. Governor Eden was certainly embarrassed by Spotswood's invasion of North Carolina, and his part in the tale of Blackbeard's treasure doesn't end with the pirate. In 1719, the treasurer of North Carolina, Edward Moseley, accused Governor Eden of profiting from Blackbeard's crimes. Could Eden had been receiving payment for Blackbeard's pardon? Had the governor and the pirates struck a deal to share in the spoils from illicit goods? Moseley was arrested and fined for his accusations. Eden's secretary of the governor's council, Tobias Knight, was also implicated in accessory to piracy when a letter, written to Blackbeard, was found on the pirate's body at his death, and by the fact that cargo taken from a ship he captured was housed in Knight's barn. Knight's letter mentioned the governor's desire to meet with Blackbeard, and this was considered sufficient evidence that Eden colluded with the pirates. But no further proof was forthcoming. Questioning of Israel Hands, after Blackbeard's demise, later revealed that Knight had been aboard the Adventure in August 1718, shortly after Blackbeard had returned. Other pirates testified that they had visited Knight's home with Blackbeard to give him presents. Knight was found to be innocent, after claiming the sugar found was legally stored and the meetings were held in an official capacity. Eden presented an account of his dealings with Blackbeard to the provincial council, which accepted his pleas of innocence. Nevertheless, Eden's reputation has long since been clouded by his connections to Blackbeard. On returning with the captured French ship to his favorite anchorage at Ocracoke, Blackbeard had told Eden that he had found the French ship at sea, deserted. A vice-admiralty court presided over by Knight, and the collector of customs, judged the ship as a derelict found at sea. 20 hogsheads of the cargo of sugar were awarded to Knight and 60 to Eden. Blackbeard and his crew were given what remained in the vessel's hold. A convenient settlement for both parties. When Blackbeard retired from pirating, he settled in Bath, which just happened to be close to Eden's home. Nearby Plum Point, known as Teats Point, has long been a favorite location for treasure hunters, captivated by Blackbeard's historical connection to the place and his hidden riches. Old foundations found here are said to have been the place where the pirate once had a home. It also lies opposite Archbell Point, where Knight purchased land in June 1718, which also made him a neighbour to Eden. It's told that there was a tunnel created under the basement of Eden's house leading to Bath Creek for the secret use of Blackbeard, but this is likely no more than a legend. A tale of a strange fireball sailing back and forth between the 2 points on Bath Creek and attributed to the ghost of Blackbeard was talked about in the 19th century as teach's light by occupants of the nearby Borner house. Blackbeard's folklore is lasting. Historical connections between these landmarks fuel belief that his treasure is somewhere in these parts and helps explain numerous holes dug in search of it. The fields between Plum Point and the town once housed a structure known as Teat's Kettle, believed to have been used by Blackbeard to boil tar to caulk his ships. This tract of land proved overpopular to public investigation to the point that the farmer concealed it and ploughed it over. The crew of pirate ships shared profits, and it was within the best interests of a vessel engaged in piracy to keep their activities as secret as possible. In the event of capture, the log of a pirate vessel would almost certainly be enough to consign the crew to the gallows. So consequently, no records were kept. The knowledge we do have of his plunder is restricted to court records, official correspondence, and the narrative written about Pyrates by Charles Johnson in 1724, which may have been embellished. We are told what was found on the adventure, but he must have raided tens of ships and fenced cargo we don't know about. Commodities may not have been treasure in the popular sense, but they were valuable, as Spotswood tells us. Raiding ships for these goods may have proved profitable and less risky. Crews of merchant ships were likely to give up their cargo much more easily compared to heavily armed Spanish galleons, which are more the realm of adventure stories. I think this explanation is plausible. Getting hold of more valuable riches may have been more a matter of chance, such as personal valuables that the crew of merchant ships may have had about their person, or more fortuitously, the gold dust found aboard La Concorde and treasure shipwrecks. The loot that Maynard found aboard the Revenge gives us an idea of the goods Blackbeard normally traded in. To think that he had a sizable treasure, and that he would benefit from hiding it seems unlikely. That being said, what was aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge that had to be transferred onto a smaller sloop when it was abandoned? Speculation of potential hiding places is unending, but it's anyone's guess exactly where such treasure would be. The east coast of America could be where he stashed treasure. Some believe his favorite anchorage on Ocracoke Island, known locally as Teach's Hole, close to where he made his last stand, is a location where his treasure can be found. But there are certainly numerous creeks and inlets along the North Carolina coast that he could have used as hiding places. It's interesting to note the fact that the British Virgin Islands has 2 islands named Great Thatch and Little Thatch, a name Blackbeard went by. There's also a Dead Chest Island, said to have been named after Blackbeard marooned some of his men on the island. It's worth noting that the novel, Treasure Island, mentions this island in its famous fictional sea song. Drawing a connection between the etymology of these islands and the famed pirate is enticing, but there's no historical evidence for him having been here. We do have historical record that on Norman Island, pirate booty was concealed. In August 1750, a Spanish treasure galleon named Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe sought shelter from a storm on the North Carolina coast. The crew mutinied, and the treasure said to consist of, amongst other things, 55 chests of silver coins, was loaded into 2 smaller ships. One ship was lost, but the second, manned by Owen Lloyd, made for Norman Island via St. Croix to bury the treasure. Owen Lloyd was arrested and the treasure distributed amongst the islanders and authorities. It's said that tales about its treasures inspired Robert Louis Stevenson to write Treasure Island, and the novel's time frame approximates to the time of salvaging the booty of the Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe on Norman Island. Explorers to this day still search for gold in the island's caves. When fact and fiction combine to create romantic tales of buried treasure, we should pay attention to the possibility that Blackbeard's treasure may be weighted more to fiction than fact. If Blackbeard's treasure consists of gold and silver coins, then such a fortune must surely be worth millions of dollars in today's money. However, I have my suspicions that the goods he seized were more comprised of commodities such as spices, sugar, and wine, and that he and his crew raided just enough to sustain themselves, just like the loot discovered on his sloop, Adventure. Anything else may have been given over in payment to Governor Eden, and lost to revelry during his sojourn in Bath. Nevertheless, treasure hunters have scoured coasts in a vain search for his wealth, which makes you wonder if the myth of buried treasure has lasted longer than its reality. His fame has certainly lasted longer than his fortune. But there is a point of view on the whereabouts of his treasure that's worth mentioning. That is that the real riches are the artifacts bequeathed to us by the wreck of his ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Their historical value in telling us about the life and times of Blackbeard is priceless. Don't miss the next clue in our treasure hunt saga. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell.